Would America ever legalize assisted death for those with a mental illness? Well, let's compare the US to Canada and see if that's possible. In 2015, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled that a blanket ban on assisted death violates the country's 1982 Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is similar to the US Constitution. Section 7 of the Charter establishes that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof. This is very similar to the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution, which says that someone will not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. In the Supreme Court order, the court did not require a terminal illness to be required to access assisted death. In response to the court order, the Canadian government devised legislation that required a person's natural death to be reasonably foreseeable, and a legal case later stated that what is reasonably foreseeable is a person-specific medical question. But then, in 2018, the case struck down the reasonably foreseeable criteria, and the Canadian government expanded MAID to individuals whose deaths were not reasonably foreseeable. The criteria was rewritten, and now a patient must be suffering from a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability in an advanced state of irreversible decline in capability and experiencing enduring and intolerable physical or psychological suffering that cannot be alleviated under conditions the person considers acceptable. On the backbone of this new criteria, Canada later announced they planned on legalizing MAID for those with a mental illness in 2024, which was later changed to 2027. One could argue that because the US has a provision in its constitution that is similar to Canada's charter, and since various US states have legalized MAID as well, that we will eventually legalize MAID for those with mental illnesses. But there is one big difference to be noted. All the states that have legalized assisted death restrict it to a terminal illness, whereas in Canada, that restriction was never put forth. So we have two questions. Is assisted death protected by the Fifth Amendment? And if it is, would requiring someone to be terminally ill restrict the US's assisted death program from expanding to include those with mental illnesses? I guess we'll have to see what the United States Supreme Court rules if it ever hears an assisted death case.